Não, já no final da pandemia, esse negócio de caminhava.
Bom dia a todos, eu sou a Fernanda Prestes e hoje eu tenho o prazer de ser apresentadora dessa primeira edição do Nuclear Summit, uma nova plataforma de debates pensada pela Abdam em parceria com as maiores empresas do setor para discutir as principais tendências do segmento nuclear no mundo e especialmente aqui no Brasil. Mas antes da gente detalhar o Nuclear Summit, gostaria de dar as boas-vindas ao meu companheiro de palco, que vai me acompanhar ao longo dessa abertura e me iniciar nesse universo nuclear, presidente da Abdam e criador desse evento, senhor Celso Cunha. Bom dia.
Bom dia, Fernanda, tudo bem? Bem-vinda aqui a esse novo mundo nuclear. Sempre um prazer estar aqui e me comunicar com a comunidade nuclear do Brasil. Não costumamos ter muitos, Fernanda, mas somos bem potentes. E com essa potência que a Abdam dá o pontapé inicial em mais uma série de painéis e apresentações voltadas para o crescimento de quem faz parte desse setor. Temos hoje aqui a presença de pessoas da minha alta estima. Saúdo o diretor-geral da Agência Internacional de Energia Atômica,
Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, Ambassador Carlos Duarte, permanent member of the Brazilian delegation in the International Agency, the Director General of Nuclear and Technological Development in the Navy, Squad Admiral Petrônio Augusto Aguiar, the Chief of Special Advisory in Strategic Management of the Ministry of Mines and Energy, Deputy Admiral Noriaki Wada, among many other distinguished guests who are watching us right now and contribute greatly to this event. In addition, we are also honored by the Director General of the World Nuclear Association, our peer association in the world stage, Mrs. Sama Bilbao, whom I would like to invite for a few opening remarks. Embaixador Duarte, Almirante, senhor Celso Cunha, senhoras e senhores, em nome da World Nuclear Association, a voz da indústria nuclear no mundo, é o meu prazer e a minha honra estar com todos vocês hoje para a cerimônia de abertura do Nuclear Summit da Abdam. Então, essa conferência está acontecendo num momento crucial da história humana, porque estamos trabalhando seriamente com atender às necessidades desse setor de forma urgente e solucionar os conflitos atuais de forma eficiente e com equidade, precisaremos da contribuição de todos. E, claro, a energia nuclear deve ser um elemento crucial da matriz energética mundial. E isso é muito importante quando a gente adiciona o elemento de segurança energética e independência energética na equação. A energia nuclear oferece uma oportunidade dourada de termos um mundo mais igual e mais limpo, no qual todos têm acesso à energia a um custo não tão alto e de forma eficiente. É um momento no qual a liderança mundial é importante para desenvolver a diversificação de estratégias de longo prazo. Então, nesse sentido, é importante implementar políticas e estruturas que reconhecem e valorizam os diversos atributos das diversas fontes de energias locais. porque isso será a chave para criar a confiança de investimento numa estrutura energética limpa. Então, muito obrigado, Celso, e muito obrigado, Abidão, pela oportunidade de contribuir para esse Nuclear Summit, no qual vamos explorar o papel essencial da energia nuclear, conforme seguimos em frente para lidar com desafios futuros da humanidade.
Obrigada, Sama, pela sua presença conosco. Foi ótimo ouvir um pouco sobre a parceria com a Associação Internacional. E queremos novamente uma palavra.
Thank you, Sama, for your words. We will soon have you back in our opening ceremony. I would also like to confirm Celso's words and have a special thanks to our sponsors. Year after year, Abdan renews the commitment of uniting and mobilizing the nuclear sector for great things. And it is only possible because we have the support of many companies. Thank you to Eletronuclear, which is not only one of the biggest Brazilian companies, they're also our main sponsor and are constantly supporting ABDAN's initiatives. Also, thank you to Fratomi, Holtec, and Tractebel NG, who are our golden sponsors, as in addition to GE Hitachi and Westinghouse, who are also our sponsors. So I would like to start by asking you, Celso, what was the reason why you created the Nuclear Summit? From where did the idea come to gather these speakers and discuss the trends of the nuclear sector? Well, Fernanda, I could say that my main focus was to deliver excellency towards the role of ABDAN. When you represent an association that groups great players of the nuclear sector, you need to be completely attentive to what is currently happening and what will be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. We are tackling big projects. The ABDAN's partner companies, they meet the energetic demands of their own countries and of other countries as well, in addition to all the parallel applications of nuclear energy in society. So it is essential for us to gather in one place the biggest authorities in this sector to discuss what is still to happen. But obviously, we are never alone. Cooperation is key, and it would not be, Nuclear Summit would not be the exception. I would also like to mention the Curating Council, the Consulting Council of BDAN, and my vice presidents who are always conversing in order to develop new initiatives. Well, to me, it's very interesting because I'm not a specialist in the nuclear theme, and it's great to be a part of it. When I looked at the schedule, I noticed that the Nuclear Summit will tackle themes that go much beyond the technical aspect of it, right? Yes. So nuclear technology is applied for many things, Fernando. This debate will lead us to realize that the nuclear energy can improve the safe development of food. It can make many products cheaper for consumers. This is something we could go on about, but to answer your question, we will go beyond the technical aspect, of course. We will discuss the main trends of the sector, which involves new technology, as well as understanding the political pathways that impact nuclear programs in countries around the world, as well as social themes like the increasing presence of women in the nuclear sector. So despite being focused on the nuclear sector, this is also an important time for everybody who is somehow involved to connect themselves to worldwide transformation. That's awesome, Celso. I'm very excited to learn in this immersion. I read all of the schedule, and I think that it would be good for us to, at this moment, go through what is expected by each panel and talk about their importance for the nuclear sector. I believe we've moved many professionals in the nuclear industry, as well as the academy, as well as the IAEA, which offered a free course on microreactors and small modular reactors during the nuclear summit. I'm not from this sector, as you know, but just from this, you can realize the scale of this event. So how did you establish this partnership? This was an amazing provision by the agency, Fernanda. And I would first like to highlight the role of our ambassador in building this partnership. This partnership is not new in any way. Last year we signed this partnership between the agency and ABDAN, which was a threshold for us, and it demonstrates the very serious work that we've been developing for the Brazilian nuclear sector. And through this work, in partnership with the agency, we were able to provide this small course in 5 hours, tackling the most relevant themes for the future of the nuclear sector. The application of microreactors and small modular reactors will allow us to reduce risk, especially economic risk reduction, more flexibility to systems, the production of heat, and many other attributes that the current nuclear generation does not currently have. So I'm very thankful for the agency for having offered this course, and I would like to share with you the words that the Director General sent over to us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to be a part of the 2022 Nuclear Summit. It's hard to believe that it's been almost 1 year that I've been last to Brazil. Some of you I know well, and Celso, during my visit, you and me signed an agreement for ABDAN and IAEA to intensify their cooperation, and I am very happy that we have been fulfilling this agreement. I would like to thank you and ABDAN for creating this event and for your dedication in stimulating debate between the main actors of this sector, especially in Brazil. Nuclear energy is very important for the future of Brazil. And Brazil, in particular, is special for the future of nuclear energy. IAEA and Brazil have a very long and fruitful partnership, and you can continue to count on us to go deeper into that partnership and do what it takes for this future. We're here to discuss the current trends of the nuclear sector in Brazil in the context of great developments in current events. And so many things are happening in Brazil and all over the world. Even for history major like myself, sometimes it feels like we're living through unprecedented times. Me and my team have been working tirelessly to help all those we can in their physical protection of their physical structures. There's been so much uncertainty in the world. It feels impossible to foresee the future. But something that we can do with a great degree of confidence is the following. Climate change will make our life harder. We will continue to depend on energy to feed the economic development and prosperity of humanity. Brazil is aware of this double challenge. Brazil is committed to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions by half by 2030 in comparison to 2005. It also plans to increase their production of nuclear energy, which provides 2% of its energy today. Brazil is building Angra 3, and on it, it can count on the full support of AEN. Brazil is not alone in building new reactors as well. There are 52 reactors currently being built across 17 countries. And over 30 countries are beginning nuclear programs as we speak in this search for low-carbon energy generation. IAEA is there with them to help countries in the several stages of their journey and guarantee that the very important basis of safety, physical protection, and safeguarding are established. A great part of the nuclear energy that we use is proved and operational. More efficiency and less waste and more saving are very important factors that are part of the policymakers' decisions when they consider their energy options. Advances in all stages of the nuclear cycle, including the management of waste, can have an impact in the future of nuclear energy. That is why I am very glad that Brazil is sharing their long experience in nuclear energy with IAEA and with the rest of the world. In Brazil and in many other countries, these small modular reactors have been a great factor. IAEA is also ready to help in that element. Our SMR platform provides our member states simplified access to the full support range of IAEA in developing and establishing technology to the safety and safeguarding issues of reactors. And Brazil is part of this delegation in this initiative of harmonizing and standardizing the nuclear sector, the Nuclear Harmonization and Standardization Initiative, for the safe implementation of this initiative and developing regulatory initiatives for the world. And we will support the effective implementation of this very relevant piece of technology. As energy demand increases and economic and environmental goals are also on the rise, our challenges rise with them. Nuclear energy will play an essential role in that.
There's a lot to be said in this event. So to conclude, I'd like to congratulate all of us here to be here to discuss these topics, to foster collaboration and to advance Brazil in its nuclear journey. Thank you very much once again. I wish you, all of you, a great conference. And live with us is also the permanent representative of Brazil at the IAEA. So let's talk to him. So Celso, I'd like to welcome Ambassador Carlos Duarte. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank ABDAN and Celso Cunha to be a part of the opening ceremony of this important event, the Nuclear Summit. I'd like to greet Minister Bento Albuquerque, the Minister of Mines and Energy, Dr. Sama Bilbao and Leon, Director General of the World Nuclear Association, and other participants. As the permanent representative of Brazil at the IAEA, I must highlight my satisfaction with what's been mentioned by the Director General in his message, and also by what has been said by Celso Cunha. That is, the agreement signed between the agency and ABDAN because this agreement has already generated results. Brazil has an intense relationship with the Atomic Agency, and we can deepen this agreement. And this is what we have been doing, not just with government agencies, but with ABDAN. At this event, we have some of the main manufacturers of parts and equipment for the nuclear sector, which is a sector that has a lot of potential for growth in Brazil and in the world. Here in Brazil, the Angra 3 plant and the perspective of new plants in the southeast is something that we want to achieve by 2030. In the world, we have 52 plants being constructed. So we're talking about an energy that should be increasing its proportion of the energy matrix, especially because of the contribution that it can make to achieve our decarbonization goals. Now, because of the uncertainties and because of the challenges that we have in the world today, that include combating climate change and assuring nuclear safety, and even in the case where we see armed conflict, the increase of nuclear energy is important for us to discuss the nuclear future in Brazil and in the world. There are challenges and opportunities for safety, for physical protection, for safeguards, and for a lot of different things. We also have challenges for the development of new technologies that are safer and more efficient, such as the small modular reactors, the SMRs. There are also challenges and opportunities when it comes to applications in agriculture, in medicine, and in public health, and in the environment. And we've got regulation and safeguards of new technologies and applications. And we've also got things that we have to do related to the rights of nuclear energy. So the relationship of Brazil with the Atomic Agency is very broad, and it can become even more relevant. The mission of Brazil is here. We are here to make this dialogue even easier and to explore and develop new opportunities with the agency. We're always working in coordination with governmental agencies responsible for this area, and we maintain this privileged articulation with the private sector, which is provided by ABDAN. So thank you very much, and I wish this nuclear summit a lot of success. Celso, so on the topic of small nuclear reactors, besides this course that has been offered by the agency, there are many other talks throughout the program that will address this theme. So what was the reason behind that decision? Okay, Fernando, well, as I mentioned previously, the topic of microreactors and small modular reactors is a hot topic. ABDAN, in fact, created a permanent forum that will be taking place throughout this year, and this includes the president of the Energy Planning Agency, and this forum was created so that we can talk about this topic and its development in Brazil. So even though we have a mini course being offered by the IAEA, our sponsors and associated companies also have a lot of authority on this topic, and they have a lot to share with us. So we cannot leave this knowledge out of this event. Well, Celso, considering the caliber of guests that I see here, I think that your sponsors and associates will be very happy to be a part of this event. So I'd like to take this opportunity in talking about our partner companies to thank them and also to talk about what the audience can expect from tomorrow's first panel. The panel offered by Eletronuclear with panelists from ATEC, from Atom, and Technatom is something that will be interesting. Yes, tomorrow, Eletronuclear will initiate a discussion round related to the business opportunities for companies in the nuclear sector and related to the following macro themes: the extension of service life of Angra 1 and 2, the conclusion of Angra 3, and the future nuclear plants. Now, Eletronuclear is the biggest purchaser in Brazil of nuclear material. There is not any other company in Brazil that demands so much from the supply chain of the segment. So that's why we're bringing Ricardo Santos, the director of the company, to talk to the market about what the focus is of Eletrobras' purchases, considering the projects that I mentioned above. So this is a debate that you don't want to miss if you work in a supplier. There's nothing more important for you to watch tomorrow. Okay, so that's the tip from the president of ABDN for all companies of the sector. So tomorrow at 9 a.m., we will have this debate promoted by Eletronuclear. And I'd like to remind you that all of the panels are interactive. So if you represent a company and you have any questions about the content being presented, send us a comment on YouTube, and our staff will direct your question to the panel's moderator. And before we go on, I'd like to invite you to watch two brief videos that were sent by our sponsors. Okay, so we're back. And now, Celso, I'd like to call you to talk about a topic that goes beyond nuclear technology. So we have a panel exclusively dedicated to debate the presence of women in the nuclear sector? Yeah, exactly. They are empowered. So yes, for sure, we have women who have had an increasing presence in the nuclear field, and this is easily seen. A lot of women are occupying positions of leadership at the greatest institutions, and this is a social transformation that we need to celebrate on a daily basis. We have names that you don't want to miss, like the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Westinghouse, and also the President of the movement Women in Nuclear Brazil, who had an important participation in this scenario. But I don't want to be the one talking here about women leading the nuclear sector. I'd rather give the floor to one of them. So Sama, it's now your turn. I give you the floor.
I'm sorry, could you tell me the question in English?
Sama, can you hear us? Okay, so he was saying that he doesn't want to be the one talking about women being leaders at this nuclear summit. He wants to give you the floor to talk about that.
In the nuclear sector.
Okay, okay.
So if you can tell us more about it, your position, and other women that are joining the sector and making their space.
Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada.
I agree that,
Bom, eu concordo.
as you said,
Como você disse, para realizarmos essa promessa de energia nuclear na velocidade, na escala que nós desejamos, nós realmente precisaremos recrutar e reter todo o talento.
Perfeito. Obrigada, Sama.
Thank you, Sama. So this is a theme that moves me a lot, not just as a woman, but in our society, because I also do a lot of projects based on the perspective of women and regarding gender equality. So I think it's very important and very interesting for the event to bring this topic and to show that women are more inserted in this technical field, which again is a field where we don't see a lot of gender equality. And now I'd like to go to the next topic, which is mining and fuel. So, Celso, the importance of this panel seems very clear to me. When I think about fuel, I think about energy, and when I think about energy, I think about nuclear. But what can we expect in terms of news about this theme at the Nuclear Summit? Well, there's a lot of stuff happening, Fernanda, and I'd like to start by saying that there are two important fronts that need to be addressed. First of all, there is the world context in which fossil fuels are becoming more expensive, and this is something that heats up our debate and accelerates transformations. At the end of 2021, we had one of our associates doing an unprecedented test with a fuel composed of a mixture of uranium and plutonium. So again, studies are being done, projects are being developed, and those who are not paying attention to the movement of the great players will fall behind. Secondly, I'd like to go back to the topic of the moment, which is the SMRs, the small modular reactors. and that includes microreactors. They demand a special type of fuel for their full operation. And because these reactors are at the center of our transformation, their growth will drive this theme. The Department of Nuclear and Technological Development of the Navy is also currently testing the first nuclear-propelled submarine. And this submarine is being developed with technology developed completely in the country. So these military technologies are then adapted to everyday life, and they promote important historical transformations. You might not remember, but the internet itself was born out of this context. And to talk about this, we have none other than the person who is heading this project within the Brazilian Navy. It's the Director of Nuclear and Technological Development of the Brazilian Navy, Admiral Petrônio Augusto Aguiar. Okay, well, thank you, Celso. Dr. Sama Bilbao Leon, Director General of the World Nuclear Association, Ambassador Carlos Duarte, Permanent Representative of Brazil at the IAEA, Vice Admiral Noriaki Wada, Representative of the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Brazil. On behalf of you, I'd like to congratulate all the participants of this symposium. Since 1979, the country, by means of the Brazilian Navy, has been pursuing an objective of building, independently, a nuclear-propelled submarine. Since that time, we've been pursuing the development of partnerships with academia and with the industry in the pursuit of a triple alliance. In 1981, aligned with the Institute of Energy Institute, the Brazilian Navy began the construction of a research reactor while it was trying to master the fuel cycle with national technologies. The IPEN reactor and the mastery of uranium enrichment were achieved in 1988. And this created a milestone in national nuclear technology. Currently, the Navy nuclear program is developing and building a prototype of nuclear propulsion. And that's the Laboratory of Nuclear Energy Generation, whose acronym is LabGen. This is an initiative so that we can achieve an embarked nuclear plant that will be used on our first nuclear-propelled submarine. This small nuclear reactor being built at this lab, has the capacity to be adapted to other means to benefit Brazilian society, providing energy and desalinated water for regions that have a low capacity for storage and with low water supply. So this affirmation is based on the proposal of a SALT project, which involves the National Commission for Nuclear Energy and their institutes. It also includes the Brazilian Navy and the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. The analyses being done allowed us to estimate that based on a similar reactor, a reactor similar to what's being worked on LabGen, would be able to provide power to a large number of people, or alternatively, could be used by different industrial sectors. So considering this cultural context, and in an attempt to maintain ourselves at the heart of the national nuclear program, the Brazilian Navy recognizes that the building of small modular reactors mirror an increasing global interest. And at the same time, they represent a technological challenge, and they point us to a future contribution of the nuclear sector to meet the global needs for the reduction of carbon. And this has positive developments in Brazil. Currently, it's possible for us to see the existence of more than 70 SMR projects with different applications. And these applications can be used in different configurations. Considering this context, these reactors, which have special characteristics which make them highly portable and flexible, these reactors can be reconfigured to be used in a marine setting, such as, for example, for the desalination and production of desalination of water and production of energy. And this allows us the new nuclear developments in the ocean. For Brazil, considering the importance of the Blue Amazon and considering the economics of the ocean, the nuclear option for the ocean seems to be very attractive. And we have the following options: the installation of SMRs in coastal regions and islands, the generation of energy with hydrogen, desalination with small reactors, the use of microreactors for the production of oil and gas, and there are also other initiatives that are possible. So these examples of the application of nuclear technologies will contribute to national development and will generate well-being for Brazilian society. So having said that, it's with a collaborative spirit and it's with enormous satisfaction that we will participate in this seminar together with our representatives from the Technological Center of the Navy in São Paulo and with the Nuclear Safety Institute and with our company Amazônia Azul. Lastly, I'd like to express my thanks to the President of ABDAN, Mr. Celso Cunha, for giving us this opportunity. And I wish that the Nuclear Summit 2022 will meet the objectives that were established. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was our Squad Admiral's contribution, responsible for many projects in the Brazilian nuclear energy sector. We are reaching the end of this first sector of our event. I now have a better perspective of what to expect from the Nuclear Summit. Thank you to Celso Cunha, the president of ABDAN, who is my partner here in conducting this event. But as we all know, it is not over. And following us, we will have a very interesting panel. I would like to hear from you about what this debate will be all about with the director of CHESF, Mr. Reivi Santos. The world has found thermal nuclear generation again. So why do you think that is relevant? Well, I can answer you through the topics that are described in the panel. Starting with the guests, you can observe that we've brought many different people from different sectors, different fields rather, so that we can go deeper into this debate. And when you see the subjects that they will debate, it is all based on the future. We're talking about green taxonomy in Europe, several different nuclear programs all over the world. We saw the French President Emmanuel Macron announce 14 more plants, more reactors in 12 years in France, $6 billion in the US for the sectors, as well as the investment in small reactors for producing hydrogen. So we have the president of the Eletronuclear to talk about the Brazilian nuclear energy generation. So the Nuclear Summit is compiling very relevant themes discussed by those who are most capable to do it. This is a debate that we need to conduct urgently. Now we would like to call our highest authority on the sector, the Chief of Special Advisory in Strategic Management of the Ministry of Mines and Energy, Vice Admiral Noriaki Wada. Good morning, everybody. I'm very honored to be the representative of the Ministry of Mines and Energy. I apologize for the absence of the minister due to his very busy schedule. Mrs. Sama Bilbao, Director General of the World Nuclear Association, Celso Duarte, Permanent Representative of Brazil in the IAEA, Squad Admiral Petronio Gutierrez de Aguiar, Director of Technological Development of the Navy, Presidents of Companies, and Celso Cunha, President of IBDAN. I would like to greet all of the national and international participants present here in this event. Good morning. I'd like to start by thanking the President of BDAN for inviting the Ministry of Mines and Energy to be a part of this very important event for the Brazilian nuclear sector. Doubtlessly, this is a very important opportunity to discuss the trends of the Brazilian nuclear sector as well as the worldwide trends. We can then evaluate where we are right now and what is our perspective for the medium and long term. As you know, Brazil has a very privileged spot in terms of having large uranium ore reserves. However, it is not enough in order to turn all of those resources into knowledge and benefits for the Brazilian population, which is the main objective of the nuclear sector. When a country has energy safety and security for its population, when it reaches its most faraway populations and raises the quality of life in their population, and when we're able to better their lives, then we reach the transformations that nuclear energy can provide. In terms of the sector governance, the separation of the regulatory competencies of producing and fostering the IAEA is the consolidation of a regulatory marker to regularize, license, control, and inspect nuclear activity in Brazil, which is part of the Brazilian government's commitment towards the sector. It is the result of the current management to address a demand that has been present for more than 30 years and meet the international requirements that prioritize the inspection and the use of nuclear energy. Another crucial line of action is the review of the legal requirements that we have. In terms of the competency of the Ministry of Mines and Energy, we are working towards developing all of the stages of the nuclear fuel cycle. In this sense, the Geological Service of Brazil re-established mineral research, and our last research effort took place at the end of the 70s, and it is based on this old data that we are placed 9th in the current rank of uranium reserves. But we know that reality is much superior to that. That is why we understand that it's very relevant for us to make this assessment up to date. In our partnerships with the private initiative in many different initiatives, in uranium and its co-products, this is a very relevant field. Uranium flexibilization is very important for us, and it has been signaled to our Congress. And we want to foster all other stages of the nuclear fuel cycle with the objective of reaching self-sufficiency in fuel production and supplying our plants and making Brazil an exporter of products, of nuclear products, be the yellow cake or fuel, or the fuel elements for the future small modular reactors, which are in development in several places across the planet. About building and operating plants for generating energy, we also understand that these stages have much to gain with our private initiatives, partnerships. So, in the short term, this subject has been worked on for consolidation as guidelines in our strategic policy discussions. With these measures, we can make thermonuclear energy more competitive in efficiency, energy security, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We know that it can be a very relevant player. So, ladies and gentlemen, the plans for expanding thermonuclear energy have been developing across the world, especially in Europe, where the planning for replacing automotive vehicles moved by fossil fuels have been replaced more and more. And its goals demand heavy investment, which includes building new plants. We are living through an inflection period due to the conflict in Eastern Europe as well. In addition, we have to again commit ourselves to reducing greenhouse gases, and we understand that the role of thermonuclear energy is more and more relevant. Brazil has also started building a new nuclear plant in addition to Angra 3. This was formalized in our 10-year plan for energy, which also includes 10 more gigawatts for nuclear energy in the Brazilian energy matrix, which means 8 new plants. And we want to go beyond that. We want Brazil to be more and more relevant in this sector and more present at the world stage. From sustainable energy, in addition to the uranium-containing sources, which include many different types of ores, Brazil wants to be one of the main players for generating nuclear energy and come closer and closer to the IAEA. In summary, in 2022, we will still have a lot to work on in the Ministry of Mines and Energy and for the entire nuclear sector of Brazil, and we count on your partnership for us to continue to better the lives of the Brazilian population. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Deputy Admiral. We are reaching the end of this first part of the event. Thank you so much to the President of BDAN, Celso Cunha, who is conducting the opening ceremonies here with me. And as I said, we will soon have in-depth debate. Our event will last until Thursday, and you can access it here in the Nuclear Summit website. So, we would like to have a word cloud as well. We will launch a QR code on the screen now. It will be displayed until the end of the event. Scan it and tell us what you expect from the Nuclear Summit. It can be a word or an expression or even a technical term that only those who are in the field understand. You can send 2 entries, and at the end, we will create a word cloud to see what has moved people the most. Thank you so much, Celso. I loved being here and learning a bit more about the nuclear sector, and for sure the event will be very successful. Would you like to make any closing remarks? Just thank all of our partners. Remind everybody that nothing comes from nothing. If we are here, it's because we built all of it together. And that cooperation is the key word here. It is the road to build better things for our people. So the Nuclear Summit is here for you. It has come to stay, and hopefully you will enjoy it. Thank you, Fernanda, for being with us, for dedicating your time for us to have an in-depth conversation about the nuclear world. I'm going to convert one more journalist for this field. Thank you for the opportunity. Our next panel is at 10:30. Stay with us. There's a lot of nuclear summit to go. See you soon.
A Tractebel está presente em mais de 60 países. Trabalhamos com engenharia consultiva, ou seja, oferecemos soluções criativas para outras empresas ou órgãos governamentais. Por exemplo, se um cliente precisa de um projeto para um determinado empreendimento, antes mesmo de a obra começar, podemos realizar consultoria de engenharia e estudos ambientais para qualquer um dos segmentos em que atuamos. Analisamos a viabilidade, depois desenvolvemos também o projeto básico e executivo, gestão de obras, treinamentos, entre vários outros serviços. Ou seja, nosso time de especialistas pode atuar em todo o ciclo de um projeto, da estratégia, passando pelo pré-investimento, fases de implementação, operação até o descomissionamento. E isso em 5 grandes áreas de atuação: energia, água, infraestrutura, nuclear e meio ambiente. Temos projetos em mais de 160 países. A característica comum a todos eles: inovação e sustentabilidade com base nos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável da ONU. São 150 anos de história de uma empresa que não para de crescer e se desafiar. Nos comprometemos a reduzir a emissão de CO2 em todas as nossas operações e nos projetos oferecidos aos clientes. Isso porque acreditamos que o meio ambiente, as pessoas e as empresas podem prosperar juntos. Tractebel, projetando um futuro neutro em carbono.
Welcome to Holtec International, a world leader in engineering, design, and custom manufactured equipment to the energy industry and beyond. Founded in 1986, Holtec has expanded globally with operation centers around the world. Holtec's 4 manufacturing plants use state-of-the-art fabrication and automation tools to create cutting-edge technology and innovative equipment. Holtec's skilled professionals specialize in unique disciplines that include nuclear analysis, specialty engineering, design, and manufacturing. Holtec leads the industry in management of spent nuclear fuel. More than 120 nuclear power facilities rely on Holtec for wet storage rack and insert design and implementation. Over 130 nuclear power plants rely on Holtec for dry storage and transportation equipment and services. This long-standing experience in spent fuel management has now positioned Holtec as a premier leader in decommissioning of shuttered nuclear power plants. Holtec innovation continues to evolve with the design of its SMR-160 small modular reactor, the licensing of the HiStor Consolidated Interim Storage Facility in southeastern New Mexico, a safe, secure, retrievable, temporary storage solution, With innovation that knows no limits and technology that continually evolves, it is clear why we say, Holtec International, a generation ahead by design.
This is for you. You who see how essential electricity is to people's lives every day. You who understand how we must reduce our CO2 emissions now. You who know that nuclear energy is a powerful source of low-carbon electricity. It is also an industry that demands unparalleled levels of safety and security. Yes, this is for you. You who know that for over 60 years, we have been designing and building nuclear steam supply systems. We have been developing and manufacturing components and fuel assemblies for all the major electrical utilities in the world. We have been delivering the heavy and mobile components needed for the nuclear island, as well as the instrumentation and control solutions. That we provide the maintenance and engineering services for more than 250 nuclear reactors around the world, and that we are participating in the construction of new reactors in France, China, Finland, and the United Kingdom. So yes, this is all for you. You who trust in the expertise, the experience, and the commitment of our 14,000 employees. Whether you be an electrical utility customer, engineer, new graduate, or simply a consumer of energy anywhere in the world, this film is for you, for each and every one of you, because you believe in nuclear energy, because you trust Framatome, because every day we are committed to serving our customers and working for energy that is competitive, reliable, and safe.
Sim. Estou falando agora no microfone para o português. Agora eu estou falando no microfone do inglês. qual canal? Português ou inglês? Tá, estamos aqui falando. Falo inglês ou falo em português? Okay, so we're speaking English here to test the microphone for the Nuclear Summit 2022, and soon we're going to be starting the second part of the summit, where we will have a panel with 4 specialists that Lucas, vai ter 10 minutos de anúncio. Você Good morning to everyone. My name is Rodrigo Polito. I'm a journalist at the Megawatt Channel, and it's with an immense pleasure that I'm here today to present this panel of the Nuclear Summit, which is another unprecedented initiative of ABDN for our sector. As Celso mentioned previously, we work in the future, and we need to be 10 steps ahead in order to make use of all of the opportunities of the world context is offering us with regards to the supply of energy, and also to promote positive transformations in the way in which we all live. And I'd just like to make a quick comment. Before, we mentioned the name of a sponsor, and the name of the sponsor is Framatome. They are supporting, they're one of the sponsors of this event, so I just wanted to correct that. So the debate of this panel here today was born exactly out of the observation of what's happening around the world. And I'd like to remind all of those who are watching us that you can participate by means of questions and answers through YouTube. For those of you watching the event on the page of the event, and if you want to make a comment, you just click on the YouTube icon, and our team will consolidate the questions and bring them to me. And pay attention, because we will soon have a poll to listen to your opinion about these topics. Okay, so we recently had the events of COP26, in which the use of nuclear energy was broadly discussed by the greatest powers in the world. And a lot of very bold plans were drafted with the objective of meeting the decarbonization goal for the medium and long term. And this brought us a wide variety of subjects that we can talk about. And it is based on these topics that we will open our panel with questions for our interviewees. So to conduct this debate with me, I've got with me here today one of the greatest specialists of energy in Brazil, which is Mr. Heivi Barros dos Santos, who's the Director of Engineering at CHESF. And he is, for the second time, my partner in the studio, because he was here with me last year. So good morning, Heivi. What's your expectation for this morning? Good morning, Paulito. Good morning to everyone. So I'd like to start by greeting Dr. Sama Bilbao, Maria Korsnick, our colleague Leonan, and Mauricio Tomaskin. I'd like to greet all of those who are watching us. It's great to be able to participate in the Nuclear Summit to talk about the expansion of nuclear energy in the world, and especially in Brazil. It's important to highlight that the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the war in Eastern Europe, caused countries to reevaluate their strategies, especially with regards to the production of food and energy. And in this context, Brazil has a very important role in terms of its contribution. So I have positive expectations in regards to the debate that we'll be having here today, especially because of the topic being addressed. So instead of asking the question, did the world reunite thermonuclear generation, I'd actually make an affirmation. I'd like to say that the world did reunite with thermonuclear generation. And I'd like to highlight the quality, the caliber of our guests. So I believe we will have an excellent debate this morning. Thank you, Heivi. And we are not getting the audio. We were together at another event last year, the NT2E, that the ABDN brought to us last year. So we talked to Heivi, and it was great having you here, Heivi. And besides Heivi, we will have live with us here today 4 specialists in the energy field from Brazil and from the rest of the world. So considering the caliber of our guests, we'll have a great debate here. So to give you a little bit of context about the importance of what happened after COP26, I need to mention some facts so that everybody can know about them. I'd like all of us to be on the same page. So China announced a program to build 150 reactors in 15 years. France also announced 14 new reactors, 9 which will be built immediately, and another 5 reactors in the future to try and seek carbon neutrality up until 2050. And England announced a construction line for small reactors. And the United States recently announced an investment of $6 billion to revitalize the production chain of the nuclear sector, besides the construction of small reactors for the production of nuclear energy, making use of the existing structure of coal power plants. So in Brazil, at the same time, last year, and after that, we had the national 10-year energy plan, and this plan brought us information that we will be having 8 to 10 gigawatts of new power generation up until 2050, which is something that was mentioned previously. And this 10-year plan also brought us the possibility of a fourth power plant after Angra 3. So we will be bringing this topic to our discussion. And we can contrast this to Germany, that in the past had decided to deactivate nuclear power plants. And today they are facing a problem with a lack of energy because of this crisis unfolding in the Ukraine. This is something that may be impacting them. So this is what I wanted to talk about to kind of heat the topic up and to help us and to help direct the question to the Director General of the World Nuclear Association, which is an association that's intrinsically linked to the whole production chain of nuclear energy in the world. So good morning, Sama, how are you?
Bom dia. Eu estou muito feliz de poder estar aqui com você hoje.
So, Sama, how do you see the unfolding of these activities in Brazil and the world, considering that we're having problems in supplying fuel at the world level related to the conflicts in Eastern Europe, just as we mentioned, and at the same time, the demand for energy continues to be very high. So how do we deal with this issue?
Bem, como você disse, você já nos deu vários exemplos de como vários países começaram a olhar para a energia nuclear como uma parte-chave de sua matriz energética. Então, a energia nuclear oferece uma oportunidade dourada para criar um mundo mais equitável, no qual todas as pessoas têm acesso a energia limpa e abundante e uma alta qualidade de vida. Então, a boa notícia é que
low carbon heat. That could be also a game changer to decarbonize other hard-to-abate sectors beyond electricity, such as, industrial processes, heating and cooling for buildings, the production of hydrogen generation, or perhaps fresh water. So this is very important. And in addition to that, in addition to the traditional large reactors that we have seen, we also are talking about small modular reactors, advanced reactors, micro reactors. All these new technologies may also have a very important role. So, for example, small nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, present several new technical features that could enhance the construction predictability and can lead to potential reductions in construction costs and in construction schedule. So also because they are smaller and because they are designed with modularity and simplicity in mind, they can become perhaps much more affordable and they can be easier to deploy in countries that are newcomer countries. So this is some of the new opportunities that we see because also they can be very highly customizable and they can be focused on special markets and applications. So again, many opportunities, many exciting projects in the pipeline. You mentioned a few. In Europe, in Central and Eastern Europe, in North America, obviously Brazil and Argentina, also in Asia and in North Africa, Egypt and Turkey. So the reality is that there is much going on, and the promise and the potential of nuclear energy to help with decarbonization, to help smaller economies to grow, to energize, and finally to help many countries to be energy independent is also quite important.
Okay, so you mentioned Brazil and the contribution of other countries. Now, regarding Brazil, how do you believe Brazil can contribute in the scenario? How do you believe Brazil can contribute to the world?
Não estamos recebendo o áudio da Sama. Os intérpretes não estão recebendo o áudio da Sama. Continuamos sem acesso ao áudio da Sama.
Sama, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. So I would say that Brazil is one of those countries that has a lot of experience, a lot of history in the use of nuclear energy. So I think that it could be instrumental to the economy and the decarbonization plans of Brazil, but also there are opportunities to move outside of the Brazil scenario. So I would say that the first thing for Brazil is to support the long-term operation for Angra 1 and 2. It is certainly very important to ensure the continuity of the superb nuclear industry that Brazil already has, and to secure and further develop the supply chain in Brazil. Obviously, the next step is very important, which is already ongoing, is to finalize Angra 3, which will, of course, help develop and consolidate the capacity in building and the know-how in Brazil. And then finally, I think that it's very, very important to have clarity and continuity for the construction of this fourth nuclear power plant that is expected to be completed by 2031. So all these, I think, are super important, and I think, obviously, I think that part of the thing that makes Brazil maybe more very unique, perhaps, is that there is very bold, pragmatic thought leadership in the government in Brazil that has been for quite a while quite strong on the importance of nuclear for the long-term energy plans of Brazil, and clearly that is going to help to develop policies, to develop market frameworks, and also to create confidence and to incentivize investment in the clean energy infrastructure. So what I would say is that as Brazil works in those national projects and further develops the national capabilities, and also I think that Brazil could be a very important example for other countries if all these projects can be done on time and on budget. And this can be an example that can be taken outside of Brazil, bring this experience to experienced and newcomer nuclear countries as an example. And I think that in this case, the nuclear industry in Brazil will be able to contribute and to support perhaps newcomer countries that are really looking forward to speed up and to accelerate the deployment of new nuclear in their countries.
Thank you, Sama. That was great. So besides the world context, we had another important event for the nuclear sector, which was the announcement of the European taxonomy recognizing nuclear energy as a green source of energy. And this brings new financing opportunities for the construction of nuclear power plants in the world. Do you believe that this measure will be enough to accelerate the process of construction of new plants in the world? And how do you believe Brazil can benefit from this measure?
Well, I agree with you that the fact that nuclear energy is now adopted in a delegated act in the European Union taxonomy is important. I mean, obviously, you know, there are still a few steps for this to actually be finally approved and fully implemented. So there is some work that still needs to be done, and certainly we hope that everything will get to a good ending. But, you know, this has been a very tortuous and sometimes frustrating process in which the inclusion of nuclear energy in this sustainable financing framework has been politicized and we haven't really looked at the things that really matter, which is to know whether nuclear energy is sustainable or not. So there was a very clear message that was delivered by the Joint Research Center of the European Commission that established without a doubt that nuclear energy is sustainable just as much as all the other energy sources that were already participant in the taxonomy. So what is very good, I think, about the fact that nuclear is in the taxonomy is that it has helped galvanize some other European countries that individually were supportive of nuclear energy, but now they are working together to make sure that nuclear energy is appropriately recognized within the context of Europe. So now the question is, you asked me about Brazil. The European Union taxonomy applies to Europe, but the reality is that it can be incredibly influential to many other sustainable and climate taxonomies that are taking place all over the world. So currently, World Nuclear Association is monitoring and mapping all the activities in this area. We have over 20 national and regional sustainable finance taxonomies that are currently active or under development. And these taxonomies differ enormously in scope and in granularity, and many of them are not as complex and as comprehensive as the EU taxonomy, but certainly it would be important for nuclear energy to be recognized as green and sustainable in some or at least many of these taxonomies. So the other thing that I want to highlight for you is there is many other activities at a global level in the area of sustainable finance and climate finance that are going to try to mobilize sustainable capital for nuclear energy projects, and also to increase the harmonization of the ESG, environment, social, governance standards that are becoming very important in the finance community. So all those efforts are going to help not only mobilize capital, but they are going to help to have some homogeneity for the disclosures and reporting standards that we have to have, and also for its management. So, and let me just finalize by answering your question. I think that if all these initiatives, or many of them, recognize nuclear as sustainable as it should definitely be done, I think that Brazil and many other countries in the world will be able to access this new capital, private capital, that is going to be used for clean development of nuclear infrastructure.
Thank you so much, Sama, for your opinion. We've just heard the opinion of the Director General of the World Nuclear Association. And now, about this current worldwide trend for the application of nuclear energy, and also about nuclear energy, we were going to return to the announcement of the investment of $6 billion in revitalizing their nuclear chain, in addition to the incentive of building small reactors. To comment on that specific subject, we've brought the president of the Nuclear Energy Institute, the Commercial Association of the Nuclear Industry in the United States, Mrs. Maria Korsnick. Good morning, Mrs. Korsnick.
Good morning. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Korsnick, how do you interpret the impact of this investment of the North American government in the decarbonization of the American and worldwide matrix? We would also like to hear your opinion on how Brazil could potentially benefit from that North American program.
Well, great. Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned the several $billion program that the United States government has been involved in, and it's really in a couple pieces. There's a part of it that extends to the current fleet of reactors, and there's a portion of it that encourages the building of new reactors. And so it's really a very strong statement by the United States government that they value nuclear power, they value the current nuclear power that they have, as well as they want to encourage new builds. You mentioned earlier in your comments about the opportunity, for example, for nuclear to exist where current coal plants exist. And in fact, one of the pilot projects that the government is funding is the TerraPower project, and that will be in fact built at a coal site. We're really very interested in demonstrating very much synergy between the nuclear fleet, bringing that clean energy and jobs to places that previously have used fossil fuel. When you reflect and say, and how could this help Brazil? I would say that Brazil has long demonstrated its connection to nuclear power, and I think this is an opportunity for Brazil to demonstrate, as the rest of the world is sort of really reinvigorating their interest in nuclear power, it's an opportunity for Brazil to do the same. Sama mentioned the fuel supply as well, and I think that's also an opportunity for Brazil. As the rest of the world gets interested in nuclear, I think Brazil has quite a bit to offer.
Thank you. Specifically about Brazil, we have the 9th largest reserve of uranium in the world, having only surveyed a third of the national territory. So you also mentioned it in your initial response. How do you see Brazil gaining space as a potential supplier of fuel in the world stage?
Well, as I mentioned, as the rest of the world sort of reinvigorates their attention around nuclear, that requires additional fuel supply. And Brazil is blessed with some uranium reserves, and you also have a market for enrichment and for fabrication. As you look ahead to the nuclear market, if you listen to what everybody else is interested, I'd say by the end of the 2020s and clearly into the 2030s, there's going to be a significant increase in demand for enriched uranium. With the unfortunate events that we're seeing play out with Russia and Ukraine, many countries want to step away from Russia. And this is a prime opportunity for Brazil to fill that void and be able to step into the enriched uranium market.
Thank you, Mrs. Skornik. Thank you so much for your participation. It's a great honor clarifying these issues for us. Well, many things have been said here at this beginning. I would now like to hear the opinion of our specialist about Sama and Mrs. Skornik's participation. Mr. Javier Barros, what are your comments about what we've all heard up until now? So first of all, congratulations to Sama Bilbao and Maria Korsnick for their excellent contributions concerning the worldwide scenario on nuclear power. In what Sama said, it's become clear that nuclear is a low-carbon, clean and efficient source of energy, which includes traditional consumers as well as industry processes. That is characteristic of that source. It derives opportunity of exporting hydrogen. In Brazil's case specifically, that is an opportunity. Sam also talked about the SMRs. That's very relevant. Differently from the large reactors, you have concentrated energy generation for a specific region. these small reactors, they can be used in distributed generation, which is closer to the demand, maybe not just the market's demands, but also increasing electrical safety, which allows specific applications, in her words. And in the case of this new technology, it allows the reduction of costs, of time, and enables the implementation of nuclear power in other ways that we would not otherwise be able to with our large reactors. And it's become clear that Brazil, with this restart of Angra 3 and Angra 4, that we are in a prime position to lead in that field. In Latin America, Brazil's protagonism in the field is essential. First of all, because we have the technology, we have the fuel, and we have the opportunity of using these for the internal market and the external market as well. Another opportunity was mentioned was the taxonomy, which is essential for funding sustainable projects. It was a recently launched movement in Europe, and we need to be attentive to it, because for sure, the funding opportunities will come, specifically to Brazil soon, in companies and in sustainable products. Mrs. Skorshnik gave a very important piece of information on American strategy. America has a very deep concern with energy safety. They lead the world in terms of energy strategy. And one information in particular, which I think is relevant for Brazil, is how well we can use nuclear power generation in sites that previously used fossil fuels.
Deixar de utilizar a geração a carvão, notadamente, vai criar problema de desemprego.
Leaving fossil fuels behind leaves a gap of jobs, and by replacing it with nuclear would ensure employability in regions where fossil fuels would no longer be used. So I think that's a fundamental opportunity that also, I believe, will play a role in Brazil. This is something that we need to study in much depth, maybe not immediately, but in the medium-long term. Something that I would like to highlight in both speeches is the difference between Brazil to other countries around the world. The challenge of Brazil today is to manage our opportunities and the supply of renewable resources that we have here in Brazil. That is our challenge, our differentiating factor. Brazil, we have a very wide range of energy supplies. Our supply is almost double of our demand. There's a lot of surplus. So from my understanding, from these two strategies presented by Sama and Mrs. Skorshnik, I believe that Brazil's strategy will have to be as an exporting country. Nuclear will play a role in that for us to meet the demands of our own market and take the opportunities of the renewable sources and for them to be more focused on exporting. And by exporting, I mean exporting hydrogen power, interconnection between Latin America. So that, I believe, is what is my main takeaway from the information gathered by Sama Bilbao and Maria Skorshnik. Thank you so much, Heavy. Now we would like to bring you into the conversation and make a poll. Crew, please, let's launch our QR code. Just scan it with your camera to be a part of a poll. I will also do it.
Esses ao vivos aqui, às vezes, se o meu não der certo, vou só pegar aqui. Agora, deixa eu tentar aqui agora.
Okay, let me try.
Acho que eu consegui. Espera aí, quase derrubei a mesa.
I got it.
Agora vai. E a gente faz junto. Está abrindo aqui. Foi. Bom. Qual o principal desafio?
So, what is the main challenge for implementing nuclear energy according to the PNE of 2050, the National Energy Plan to 2050?
De acordo com a previsão no Plano Nacional 2050.
This is a question that came to us.
Opções, né?
So we have 4 options in this poll. Safety, communication, institutional, which is public policy, or costs. So you can vote.
Vai ser lançado aqui o desafio, né?
This is the challenge that's been launched.
Vou fazer minha votação aqui também.
I will cast my vote.
Foi. Vamos agora eu avanço, né? Vamos seguir aqui. Mas antes de continuar com o nosso evento aqui, a gente tem mais um vídeo patrocinador.
We have one more sponsor video
Nuclear Summit, Nuclear,
who supports our Nuclear Summit.
Bom, pessoal, estamos de volta aqui ao vivo para continuar esse debate do Nuclear Summit.
We are back. Now our guest is the president of this sponsor, very important company for the Brazilian nuclear sector, the president of Eletronuclear, Mr. Leonan Guimarães. Good morning, Leonan. What do you think of our debate? Nós estamos recebendo o áudio do Leonan.
Leonan, a gente está sem... acho que ficou mudo o seu som.
Já, falha nossa.
Agora foi.
Well, I'd just like to start by greeting Maria and Saman for being a part of the event. It's a great honor for us to receive them here in the event. So I think the most important point right now is that the current events have highlighted two very important characteristics of nuclear energy as a worldwide source of energy. The first one was the fuel crisis that we had a while ago, which disturbed a few countries. That was before the war.
And it became clear to us that the energy transition, in terms of decarbonization, was not moving ahead as planned. So we believe nuclear energy was going to have a bigger contribution to decarbonization. So that's one of the fundamental aspects. Soon afterwards, we had this great event, which was the war in Eastern Europe, and this caused enormous international commotion. It was something unexpected to a certain extent. On the other hand, it brought to the fore some other problems, because it showed us that nuclear energy can contribute to nuclear safety, electrical safety. And electrical safety or security is a result of density. We can store energy in small volumes with nuclear power plants. And this helps us deal with instabilities. So this is something that's been highlighted. And so we have decarbonization and electrical security. And these are two things that nuclear energy can deal with in our energy matrix. In the Brazilian case, as you've mentioned before, we have a forecast for increasing the generation of nuclear energy of between 8 and 10 megawatts. And I'm sorry, am I having problems with my audio? No, okay. So the role of nuclear energy is different from the global role. And this is because of something very evident. At a global level, the energy matrix is dominated by the use of coal. And so people are looking to decarbonize. And as in the case of China, it becomes a public health issue, especially in large cities. And here in Brazil, we have an energy matrix which is already highly renewable and produces relatively low amounts of carbon. And the Brazilian energy matrix has parameters that are comparable to the goals that some countries established for the next 15 to 20 years. And the renewability of our energy matrix also brings us issues related to electrical security, because, you know, we've been going through some problems in the past. There's a lot of oscillation of the flow of renewable energy in Brazil. And dealing with these oscillations of energy flow is a challenge. We've been affected by lack of water, for example, water shortages. So how do we deal with these issues that are difficult to forecast? This is a challenge here in Brazil. And so in the Brazilian case, nuclear energy has a role to fulfill from the point of view of electrical security. Especially when we consider proximity to the great centers for consumption of energy. So this is a discussion that's been deepened in the rest of the world and here in Brazil. And I'd like to reinforce something else that has also been mentioned, and that is, regardless of the generation of nuclear energy, Brazil has a potential of becoming an important player in the world market of nuclear fuel. And that's because it has large reserves of uranium, and because Brazil also has masters the techniques for producing nuclear fuel. We still have some bottlenecks, but we do master the technology, and so there is a possibility to increase capacity. So we can have greater participation in the international market. And the SMRs need highly enriched uranium. And so this will create a new demand. And so we need a global industrial base to meet these new demands. So here we have a new opportunity for Brazil. And like I said, SMRs are also very important, the modular reactors. Their role in the Brazilian electrical network is something that's being discussed today. But it seems to me that these reactors can have an important role considering how they can be easily interconnected to the Brazilian electrical grid. And it would be important to have these reactors in clusters. So 1,400 reactor could be substituted by 7,200 reactors. And so that's where economies of scale come in, because the nuclear industry that brought us all of these large nuclear power plants that are being constructed in the world, they were based on economies of scale. That is, the reduction of costs based on a larger amount of production. These SNRs are trying to change this paradigm, because again, this paradigm has deficiencies from an economical perspective in terms of their implementation. So now we're talking about economies of scope. So instead of having one plant of 1,400 generation, you'd have smaller plants. So you would have quicker construction. These new plants would be of a lower cost. And these plants could be built in larger numbers. So that's a challenge of the international nuclear industry. We need to demonstrate the feasibility of this very clearly. And we already have many prototypes in development. So I believe that the economies of scope compensates for the economies of scale that were important in the past. So to summarize, the world nuclear industry and the national nuclear industry is going through an interesting moment where there are a lot of opportunities. But again, we need to make use of these opportunities. We need to pay attention so that we can make use of the opportunities that are presented to us here in Brazil and that are presented to the Brazilian industry as well. So to conclude, since we're talking about opportunities, we should remember, as Sama mentioned, that the non-electrical uses of nuclear energy, that is, nuclear energy as a producer of industrial heat or as a producer of heat and cooling for residences, and as a producer of water desalination, as a producer of hydrogen, considering that, an important infrastructure will be developed in that regard in the world. All of this means that the nuclear industry has a lot of opportunities. So our industry needs to show the value of this to society. So that's a little bit of the vision that we have, considering the general context. So once again, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. So, okay, Selena, so in your first remarks, you really answered a lot of the other questions that I was going to ask. So let's talk a little bit about Brazil, because in the National Energy Plan for 2050, there was the announcement of an addition of 8 to 10 gigawatts through the construction of new nuclear power plants. And in the 10-year plan for 2031, there was the announcement of an additional gigawatt from a fourth power plant in the southeast of the country. Now, I'd just like to complement what you said, because your answer was already very broad, but how do you see this moment that's happening in the world? And since you were very broad in your initial answer, I'd like to know a little bit more about how this issue will unfold, because, you know, in the past we had problems in terms of the lack of water shortages. Yeah, the water shortage was an influencing factor in terms of how nuclear energy could help us in Brazil, considering how it's non-variable, that is, there are not many oscillations. It operates at a 90% capacity. It also doesn't occupy a lot of physical space. So that means that it can be located close to the areas of energy consumption. So again, all of these factors make nuclear energy very competitive when it comes to expanding nuclear use. So the planning of the government consider an increase of nuclear energy generation in the country. And this increase is actually quite timid, because nuclear energy will still occupy the same proportion of our energy matrix. We're not increasing the percentage of nuclear in the energy matrix. So while the numbers seem large in comparison to our installed nuclear capacity, these numbers, 8 to 10 gigawatts, that doesn't really change the 3 to 5% that nuclear energy represents today as part of our energy matrix. So these characteristics that were highlighted by the water shortage crisis, and again, we have to remember that these plans were developed before the water crisis. The crisis basically just highlighted all of these issues that were mentioned. So in the past, a lot of studies were made in terms of the location of new risks. And for example, a lot of work has already been done in the past. And so we really need to identify and select new locations for the development of new nuclear power plants, whether they're large-scale nuclear power plants or small nuclear power plants operating in clusters, as I mentioned. So this is something that's understood not only by decision makers, but by society as a whole. So this gives us a lot of hope for the future. And we believe that Brazilian society will benefit from the important role that nuclear power has for decarbonization and for providing us with electrical safety for a country with continental dimensions such as Brazil. Okay, thank you. And you know, when you're at these events, you know, I'm always trying to make the best of your availability to ask you a lot of questions. So I just have another question that's based on our capacity to produce fuel. Do you understand the current, do you believe that the current global scenario would be beneficial to allow us to leverage our production of fuel since we master the production of fuel? Do you think that there's more space for us to grow in this market? Yes, I think we have a lot of space to grow in this market because considering the context that has already been explained by Sama and by Maria and by Heavy, nuclear energy can increase its participation in the energy matrix of different countries. And this means there will be a greater demand for fuel. So this is an opportunity, first of all, for Brazil to increase its industrial capacity in those stages where this capacity is not enough to meet the entirety of the internal demand. And here we're talking about the production of concentrate and the conversion and enrichment of uranium. So again, we have an opportunity to seek the increase in industrial capacity of these different stages. But then when we also think about increasing capacity, we need to think about the international market and the possibilities of participating in this market as an exporter, whether the export of concentrate or plutonium hexafluoride or enriched material. So we have a lot of opportunities in the medium and long term, considering those characteristics that we already mentioned, that is, having a large reserves of uranium and mastering the technology to produce the fuel. Now, a new fact is the expansion of advanced reactors. When we think about the expansion of SNRs in advanced projects, we can see that most of the projects in development today use 5 to 20% uranium, unlike the large power plants that use 3 to 5% uranium or 3 to 5%. So this opens up a new market, which used to be a niche market, which basically only dealt with research nuclear reactors. So this material has already been produced here in Brazil to meet the demands of the special reactor of IPEN for the production of radioisotopes. And so again, this creates a new perspective, new opportunities in Brazil, considering that the country already masters this technique of uranium enrichment. So we can occupy a greater place in this future market that will certainly show up, considering these new reactors, the advanced reactors and the SNRs that use this type of fuel.
Thank you, Leonan. So that was the president of the Eletronuclear. We are moving towards our last guest, but feel free to send in questions whenever you wish, as well as the result of the poll that we've launched earlier. This is just the first day of the Nuclear Summit. It will go up until Thursday with a wide range of debates concerning the transformations that the nuclear sector promotes in the worldwide energy matrix. So we'd like to bring in Maurício Tolmasquim, another very relevant source of information. He's a member of the faculty of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Nós estamos recebendo o áudio do Maurício.
Tolmasquim, desculpa, a gente está sem o som. Vê se está mudo. Não, saiu de novo.
Foi?
Foi.
Então, queria agradecer a GAN.
I would like to first start by thanking ABDAN. It's an honor to be a part of this panel, alongside Sama, Maria, Heavy. I am not a specialist like the other members of the panel. I study policy planning, and I look at the sources as a whole, and I will give my opinion looking at this wider, worldwide perspective about the issue, having had the experience of being a policymaker in that field. So I have no question that the energy transition and decarbonization is the topic. This will dictate energy policy for the foreseeable future. And COVID only stresses the importance of facing these worldwide issues head-on and in advance. I'd like to create some parallels for you with a few climate change-related situations to give you a context. In many cases, scientists have already been warning us about the dangers of pandemics, the dangers of climate change. We've heard Bill Gates talking about 2030, about the dangers of the imminent danger of a pandemic. Bill Gates wasn't a scholar on epidemiology, but he read about what the scientists were saying at the time. In 2008, he wrote a book talking about the dangers of pandemics. And before that, Walter Holmes, another specialist, was warning us about how the clock was ticking towards the next pandemic. In the same way, the clock has been ticking for climate change. In '79, many scientists gathered to discuss the theme, and we're already talking about it. The second takeaway that we can extract from that is that both of these crises are global. So only global solutions could ever hope to tackle it. And the third one is that inaction is very costly. There are studies showing that if the pandemic had been local, if other measures had been taken, the number of deaths would have been much lower. And there are many studies that indicate just how much time we would require to face climate change. So that has to be taken in consideration when making policy. And the role of low-carbon sources in energy generation is a very relevant point. But for that, you need several low-cost sources of energy. So there's renewables and nuclear. Both will play a role in the future of the worldwide energy matrix. There are some advantages, and then I will talk about the issues. We who study these things, we look at both sides. One advantage of nuclear power is that in comparison to other energies like wind and solar, is that a plant would occupy like 1 square kilometer or a bit more. So it's less than other sources. So land occupation is a factor that is an advantage. Another advantage is the fact that it is a reliable source of energy. It is not intermittent in nature. The nuclear power plants, they can operate uninterruptedly for a year or more, only stopping for occasional maintenance. So it's pretty reliable. So it is worth looking at. Other factors, which have already been mentioned by my colleagues, is the fact that Brazil has large uranium reserves, the 9th largest in the world. It is a leader in its enriching. And if we put those two factors together, that places us in a prime position to develop that sort of activity. I would cite 2 more factors. One would be the knowledge we have on nuclear technology. So we have the capabilities to develop it, and the fact that you can build the plants close to the demand centers. That is a factor that works in favor of transmission costs. There are also issues which I have to present, because it's in that balance that we make planning and management decisions. So the first one would be that uranium is not renewable, as opposed to other sources. However, in the case of Brazil, I don't see that as a large issue, because we have a very large amount of uranium. So that is
Nós, no Brasil, pretendermos realmente ter programa de larga escala.
If we in Brazil intend to have a large-scale nuclear program, we have to have I won't say definitive solution, but a more permanent solution for waste management. You can just announce it and have like a small plan for it. This is something that has to be on the forefront of our decision making. Another issue that weighs heavy on our decisions is that mismanagement could lead to catastrophe. We know that the probability is low. However, when they take place, when accidents take place, they could have catastrophic dimensions. That is something that, of course, would be an issue with any source, but we need, it is always in our minds. Along those lines, and again, I'm not a specialist, certainly my colleagues would have more knowledge on this. Some analysts say that SMRs and the small modular reactors and small reactors in general, that they are less prone to accidents. The arguments that I heard were that they're less prone to overheating because their cores are smaller, and as it is less heat, they're less prone to overheating. Secondly, they can reduce other engineering risks, such as pump failures and other things. The third argument is that there are less movable parts, so that reduces the probability of failures. And the fourth point that I heard in favor of them was that it is more reliable on passive systems, on the general management of the reactors. There is less active management required for them to operate. So you don't need as much human intervention. That would be an argument in its favor. One issue that these modular reactors may solve is that and this is inevitable, especially in intermittent sources, we need sources that complement variable sources of energy. So the flexibility of nuclear power generation restricts it for that role. Many articles talk about how the SMRs could improve on that front, because they could fill that gap. Two central issues are something that we need to consider in any nuclear development plan are, first, construction delays and costs. As a manager, I can't consider the building of a plant that has a lot of delay. When you decide to build something, you are counting on it. Angra 1 had a 13-year delay. It began, I believe, in 72, and it started operation in, I believe, in 85. Angra 2 was built across 25 years, and Angra 3 has been in construction for 37 years. So as a planner and a manager, when I think about, if I decide to build a plant that I am counting on for the next 5 years, and it takes 10, 20, 30 years, then that is an issue. I know that is not on nuclear sector managers, but the institutional model of public consultation and public bids and the politics of it has led us historically to many delays, and that needs to be taken into account.
Another fundamental issue, to conclude my line of thought, is the issue of cost. A planner thinks about energy security and cost. And we have a hard time figuring out the cost of nuclear energy generation in Brazil. For example, Angra 1 and 2 is 349 reais per megawatt hour, I think. So this is 60% more than a gas thermal power plant. And then we've got solar, which is intermittent. But I think that's an issue that's important for us to have an idea about. Now, I don't know about Angra 3. There was an article in the newspaper, and I never really trust articles that don't have any sources. But the estimate was much higher. It was around 800 reais. And if it's 800 reais, that's very expensive. So this is an element that's very important for us to take into consideration. We need to consider this in our planning. But planners cannot have any prejudice. The planner can't say, look, no, I don't want this energy source. The planner needs to analyze each one of the sources and needs to figure out which one is more interesting. Okay, so you really gave us a very complete vision. Now, because we started a little bit late, I have to organize our poll.
Marcelo, me desculpe.
Marcelo, sorry, I have some information to contribute. This is Luis here talking. I've been working in the electrical sector for 48 years. Sorry. Look, if you want to make a comment, you can just comment in the chat box, because then it'll make it easier for us to control the question and answers, okay? Now, let me just bring the poll up. I want to show people the result of the poll. So we'll be closing the poll now, so you don't have time to answer it anymore. And we will process the results of the questions. So soon we'll be showing you the results of the poll. And now we have the second question for Professor Thomas King. So, Thomas King, going back to what you were saying, when we talk about the nuclear program and we talk about costs, there's also the issue related to the production chain. The production chain is very important for the generation of jobs and income. Oh, now Thomas King is offline. Okay, so Thomas King is no longer online, so while he doesn't return, I'm going to ask a question to Heavy. So Heavy, I wonder whether you can comment on the participation of Leonan and Thomas King. Sure, Polito. So again, thank you. So this is an excellent event. In our first panel, we had an international vision, and we were able to see some of the challenges and understand the reevaluations that are being done when it comes to planning the energy matrix around the world. And now we're looking at the domestic issue at the national level. And it's interesting for us to see how the nuclear source is being considered in Brazil. And now we're looking at this from the entrepreneur's standpoint, the person who has experience in implementing these kinds of ventures. This is a very important understanding for us to have. And I'd like to reiterate what Sama said and what Ms. Korsnick already said, which is the importance of nuclear energy and utilizing SMRs. I think this is an important opportunity that Brazil has. And as a leader of nuclear ventures in Brazil, in the view of those who want to give continuity to Brazil nuclear program, and again, in the last 3 years, I think we were able to successfully define our program, because this is based on what Thomas King said before. In the past, we used to have a lot of uncertainty, but today we have a public policy with the definition of our program, and the National Energy Plan for 2030 has the inclusion of nuclear power, even though we have timid proposals. But again, if we want to incentivize a source, we need to give it scale. If we give the source of energy scale, then we'll be able to lower costs. Now, when we talk about scale and incentives and strategy, basically, when we incentivize wind energy in the ProInfa program, the price of megawatt hour corresponded to 231 reais for the megawatt hour. Now, when I adjust these numbers, today the megawatt hour costs 735 reais. So this means that the consumption, Brazilians are paying 735 reais per megawatt hour. But when I look at the current bids, the bids are at a two-digit level. So that strategic decision that was made in 2004 for the consumer to pay a little bit more to have benefits in the future, this became a reality. And this doesn't happen just with wind energy. It also happens with solar energy and with nuclear energy. So we need to have scale. When you have scale, you're able to develop a strategy related to fuel. And this is geared not only for the domestic market, but also to the international market. And Brazil has a different characteristic because we have a medium and long-term vision. We, every year, create a 10-year energy plan that gives us a vision of the next 10 years. And the fact that we do this planning every 10 years allows us to, every year, reevaluate what was planned in the past. And it also allows us to incorporate new technologies for the future. So this is the great thing about Brazilian planning. And in 2020, the new National Energy Plan was announced. And this National Energy Plan included a 30-year vision, a 30-year plan. Now, Brazil is one of the few countries in the world that has legal and regulatory stability in the world with regards to the sector. Now, obviously, we need to go deeper into the nuclear issue. The nuclear issue still has a dilemma, which is the business model. All of the other sources developed because they created opportunities. They created the correct conditions for the private market to participate. And when you have greater participation of the private market, then you have lower costs. In those models where the government still has a central role, those are the models in which the costs are higher. So I think in the future we'll be able to bring nuclear to the same level in terms of costs as the other sources of energy. Another issue that I think is important is that we have long-term contracts. No country in Brazil has long-term contracts such as Brazil, the same way as Brazil. Long-term contracts are loved by investors because investors know that that investment that they're making, those resources that they're applying, again, considering that the feasibility studies were made, these investments will bring investors a return on investment. Another positive thing of our model is the guarantee of receivables. People who sign these contracts in Brazil know that they will receive that which was stipulated in contracts. And so these contracts can be financed, not just nationally, but internationally. And then another important aspect of the Brazilian case is predictability. Today, the Ministry of Mines and Energy defines clearly what bids we will be having the next 3 years. Bids for generating energy, bids for transmitting energy. So our legal framework gives Brazil competitiveness, and it allows investors, not just local investors, but international investors, it allows these investors to invest in the country. So that's why we need very clear policies. And again, they are clear in our 10-year plan. And Professor Thomas Kuhn mentioned some things which I believe to be very important, and that is those challenges that nuclear fuel has. So we need to work on these issues to find solutions. There's the issue of nuclear waste. So we need to find solutions that give us security and safety. We need to understand that problems have solutions. Then there's also the issue he mentioned about faults that can be catastrophic, failures. But again, every kind of plant is prone to failure. And in Brazil, we had a pattern of safety in our installations. We have a level of excellence when it comes to the safety of our nuclear power plants. Now, SMRs, this is a topic that's been discussed a lot. I think, and again, once we have this long-term vision, we can have the definition of new sites. Because, for example, Angra 4 is part of a strategy, which is the following. Basically, it's a location, it's a site that has already been licensed, so you wouldn't have a hard time to have it in place by the horizon that we believe to be 2030. Now, we need to have a more aggressive long-term policy in relation to these sites. The same as what we do for hydropower plants. So I believe that our 10-year plan starting in 2032 or 2033 will be able to fill this gap. Another aspect that was very well explained by Professor Tomalskin, and that I agree with in part, is the issue of how long it takes to implement these plans. Now, because policies in the past were not very aggressive when it came to our nuclear implementations, basically any kind of plant that we're building, whether it's airports or ports or highways, anything, any kind of venture, any kind of infrastructure that depends on the government, then obviously, depending on the government, we will have delays. And so that's why we need to have a program with a model that will include the participation of the government as a regulator. And private enterprise will be able to sign contracts to meet specific demands. So this is a discussion that we need to have. Now, in relation to price, this is a problem that we planners have. We don't correctly price externalities. When you compare price with price and safety with safety, obviously there will be some distortions. So if I'm generating 3 gigawatts from variable sources, and then if I need 1 gigawatt from, let's say, hydropower plant or thermal power plant, I need to understand the price and I need to consider externalities. And that's why I can't analyze prices in isolation. And when we incentivize renewable energy sources, such as wind and solar, when we think about the number of factors that we brought to Brazil, when we think about the number of jobs that we created, and when we consider the amount of income, all of that needs to be considered. I can't isolate, I can't just analyze prices. So for the case of nuclear, I think we need to have a greater discussion. And this needs to consider everything from the mineral, from the uranium mineral, all the way to export. We need to consider everything. And in the case of Brazil, we need to consider the following. If during the next 10 years, according to the vision of the 10-year plan, if I have an expansion of 75 gigawatts, and if today I already have a capacity to produce 200 gigawatts, what we're saying is the following. The market, the domestic market is insufficient to meet the demand. And if the domestic market does not meet the demand, then all of this energy needs to be exported if we want to generate jobs and income. So that's the message that I want to leave you with. So the domestic market is already met, but I have the capacity to generate more energy for export. And how will I export energy? Well, I will focus the base sources for the domestic market, and the green energy sources will be used to produce, let's say, hydrogen, so that we can occupy the space that Brazil occupies in agribusiness. So we are a country that has water, we are a country that has renewable sources. So again, this is the challenge of the planner. We need to check what we can use as a base source for the domestic market and what I can use for the international market. And, we talked about incentives for decarbonization, and I believe that Brazil will be able to meet these international demands. So Polito, I'd like to give you the floor now. That was the summary that I had to make based on the excellent presentations and comments made by our colleagues.
Thank you, Habe. Now I would like to ask Mrs. Korsnick, and also to everybody. Leonam talked about small reactors, and everybody has a lot of expectations on this theme that's now been talked about more in Brazil, and it has been present in the US for longer. So what is the SMR scenario in the US like today, and what benefits has it brought to the energy sector?
Well, thanks for the question. Small modular reactors are on the precipice of being built here in the United States. There are several that are planned to be built over the next few years. And, you know, honestly, I sort of wish we didn't call them small modular reactors. I wish we would have called them simple modular reactors, because really what makes them give a competitive edge is their simplicity. And it's as a result of that simplicity that we anticipate them to be able to be built in a very cost-competitive fashion. I know the gentleman that spoke before me spent some time on cost. And in the United States, today, nuclear is somewhere between $35 and $50 US dollars a megawatt hour. And we believe that the small modular reactors have an opportunity to even do better than that. And what's exciting about these smaller modular reactors is that they're going to be able to partner either with wind and solar for that opportunity that they're always there, and wind and solar are intermittent, but they're also going to be able to partner with manufacturing. You know, we talk a lot about decarbonization, and mostly we think about decarbonization in the electric sector, but actually the electric sector is probably the easiest thing for us to decarbonize. And at the end of the day, we have to decarbonize the whole economy in order for us to make progress. So that includes the manufacturing sector. And as the reactors get smaller, there's a real opportunity for manufacturing to pair directly with small modular or even micro reactors. You heard Dow Chemical recently make an announcement that said they were interested in small modular reactors. As an example, Nucor Steel also made an announcement that said they're partnering with NuScale, which is a small modular reactor, for NuScale to produce the power for the steel plant. So I think that's really just the beginning of those kinds of conversations. And why is nuclear, you know, sort of the nice partner for all of this? And it's really because you can get from nuclear electricity, if that's what's interesting to you. You can convert that electricity into hydrogen, if hydrogen is interesting to you. You can also get the high temperature steam, if that's what's interesting. And so it depends on what your manufacturing facility needs, but it's a great opportunity. And actually nuclear has the ability to change. You could have electricity during the day and hydrogen at night. You could do high temperature steam and then later electricity. And so there's a lot of optionality with nuclear. And I really think it's that optionality that suits nuclear the best, because it's going to be a very interesting sort of puzzle piece, if you will, in this big picture that we have to figure out together for the whole planet. You know, at the end of the day, if you just step back and say we have to decarbonize, we need to do it in a way that is includes economic development, and we need energy security. And if we look at those three things, nuclear is especially suited to achieve all three.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Korsnick. I'd like to bring Leonam back to ask a question as well. He got a question from the chat. Nuclear reprocessing, could it not be an alternative for increasing the yield of fuel and for waste management? Yes. Fewer reprocessing, or recycling, as I prefer to call it, which is the full cycle of reprocessing and reusing. It is a very powerful tool in managing waste, as it drastically reduces high activity waste, which is about 8 85% of the fuel that is used. The difficulty of making that feasible, why countries are not able to make that in such a widespread manner, is the comparison of price between recycled fuel and new fuel. That perspective could open up more intensely in the near future, because I'm talking about the water moderated reactors was about almost 100% of the 430 reactors, the PWRs. I believe that in the advanced reactors, there are more favorable conditions for recycling fuel. So I do believe that recycling has a promise in the future. However, based on these new types of reactors that are being proposed. And we will see which ones will prevail in the next 10 to 20 years. They have many more possibilities of making recycling cheaper than the current nuclear fleet. So just in conclusion, I think it is promising, yes, with regards to waste management, in the long term especially. In the purely economic point of view, as uranium is very abundant in the Earth crust, I believe that in economic terms it will always be hard to compete in terms of price with the current technology. Again, with new technology, that could change. Going back to what Leonam said, uranium's non-renewability is a factor, but it is a very long-range non-renewability. We're talking about centuries, so that would be something to consider. Recycling is very effective in minimizing and simplifying waste management. Thank you, Leonam. Sama, this range of time, how, in the context of the current world crisis and the conflicts, what can we expect from the nuclear sector if we look at the short, medium term?
Well, as you have heard, I think we've all agreed that we are looking at a very urgent problem in front of us, right? So we need to decarbonize in the next 20 or so years. And then we also, at the same time, we need to make sure that we provide sustainable development for everybody, or for most everybody in the world. So this means that we have in front of us an incredibly enormous challenge that is very urgent. And also you saw that, I think it was a week ago or a week and a half ago, that the IPCC released the report for the third working group. So this means that the nuclear industry, together with basically any other low carbon and energy industry, really needs to ramp up very, very quickly. We need to build, the challenge is enormous. We are going to need a lot of nuclear. We are going to need a lot of wind, a lot of solar, a lot of hydro, a lot of many other low carbon technologies. So what this means to all those technologies is that we need to ramp up very quickly. That, of course, is got several aspects, right? On the one hand, certainly the nuclear industry is already investing in itself, making sure that we have the supply chain and the capabilities, whether they are human resources, whether they are the infrastructures and the capability, they know how to build these reactors as soon as possible. But also there are external needs, right? So as I mentioned earlier, and we discussed also today, I think Leonam mentioned this quite clearly, it is essential to have bold and pragmatic governments that put in place long-term plans that allow the nuclear industry and other low-carbon energy industry to be prepared, to invest and to be deployed at scale in order to achieve this enormous challenge that we all have. So I think that these bold and assertive and pragmatic governments are going to be instrumental to provide the signals that are going to put in place, first of all, the policies, second, the markets, and third, the financial frameworks that are going to help all low carbon energy sources, including nuclear, of course, to deploy with the speed and at the scale needed. And when I say this, is we really, as I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of private financing that is available out there, and we just really need to provide the signal to this financing that, number one, nuclear is sustainable, it is affordable, it is actually a key component of this energy mix that is going to become the clean energy systems of the future. And then, of course, they are going to be able to not only invest and be rewarded with adequate profits, but they are going to do it in a way that the world and humanity as a whole are also to be winners in this proposition.
Much, Sama, for your great response. So Tomasquim is now back. So we are discussing. This is Tomasquim, right? Yes. Yes. So we're discussing the modernization of the energy sector. There are some projects up for vote in Congress. And one issue is subsidies for renewable energy.
Mas, enfim, o quanto que tem essa questão dos subsídios para fontes renováveis, quando a gente fala de competitividade...
So when we're talking about competitiveness between sources, what is your opinion on that?
Polito, não sei se eu escutei a sua pergunta.
Eu acho que você está mudo de novo.
I'm not sure.
Não, não estou no mudo, não. Está me escutando? Alô? Eu estou na sala do inglês.
Can you...
Tomasquim, vê agora.
Let's see if we can hear you.
Está me escutando?
Can you hear me?
Eu aqui não ouço
I
a voz do Tomasquim.
do not.
Pode ir, Tomasquim.
Oi, está me escutando?
Sim. Sim.
Está ouvindo?
Pode continuar, pode continuar. A gente está ouvindo sim. Está ouvindo sim. Pode ir, Tomasquim.
Você podia repetir a pergunta?
Could you repeat the
eu não
question?
consegui aqui escutar. Você podia repetir, por favor?
I wasn't able to hear it.
Tudo bem. Claro, a gente está num momento de modernização do setor.
So we are modernizing the sector, right? There are many projects up for a vote in Congress, and one of the points of removing subsidies is that renewable energy sources have a lot of subsidies. So what is your opinion on that balance?
Não, sem dúvida. As fontes renováveis,
for sure.
Aliás, o
renewable
já
sources,
foi retirado, né? Os 50%.
Subsidies have already been taken away from them at a large scale, and they were removed late even,
As fontes renováveis não
because renewable energy does not require
no país.
the subsidies that they previously had, not in this country.
Viver esses subsídios, sobretudo quando eles são desnecessários. O grande problema que a gente tem atualmente
The issue that we
com as fontes
currently have
renováveis
with
justamente
renewable
que são fontes
sources is that
intermitentes
they're
e por isso ela
intermittent,
precisa de algum tipo de
and for that
complementação.
reason they
Mas
require
elas estão para viver
complementation.
sem subsídio.
But subsidies have been removed already.
Voltou aqui? Voltou aqui. Obrigado, Tomasquim. Deixa eu tirar a gente já tem o resultado da enquete?
So do we already have the poll results? Yes. So the question was, what is the main challenge for implementing nuclear in accordance to the 2050 PNE? And most people say that the main challenge is institutional, which concerns public policy, followed by price, then communication, and lastly, safety. Javi, would you like to comment on that result? Yes. To me, that is very reflective of reality.
And this is related to what I said about how we need to change the business model, competition, so that the investors can participate in this effort to expand the Brazilian electrical sector through nuclear energy. And when we consider the water shortage crisis and the price of fuel, it seems that consumers are still concerned. So it seemed to me that price would be very important, but safety is important, and communication of safety is important too. But I also agree with the results of the poll. We need to advance in our institutional model, and this institutional model needs to include participation. The success of wind and nuclear energy came from the fact that we brought partners to work in the sector. When you decentralize, when you have a business model that allows for greater participation of the private sector, then you create greater incentives for the use of any kind of source. Thank you, Javi. Okay, so we've reached the end of our debate. Thank you very much to all participants who were with us here today. We had participants of a high caliber, and thank you, Javi, for your brilliant and pleasant presence and partnership as a curator of our debate. And this is the first day of the Nuclear Summit. Tomorrow, starting at 9, we've got more. You can access the next transmissions by means of the same website, so just going to the event website. And I'd like to remind you that tomorrow we have the beginning of the free mini course offered by the IAEA. This is an opportunity that you don't want to miss to finalize the summit with a certificate that's endorsed by these international institutions. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here today, and see you next time.